The Zephyrian transmission cut through galactic bureaucracy like a knife. Planetary invasion. Species extinction. Desperate plea for help. While other civilizations formed committees, Admiral Rodriguez made a different choice. She grabbed 3 ships and 5,000 personnel with one objective: exterminate the threat. This is how Earth's Deathworlders became the galaxy's last hope against an enemy everyone else refused to face. Kepler 442b's crystal cities once cast rainbows through prismatic forests. The Zephyrians cultivated harmony, not weapons. Their civilization spanned millennia without conflict, dedicating generations to artistic expression and biological healing. Their structures grew from living crystal formations. Their music resonated through natural harmonics. Their entire existence embodied preservation. Then the void swarm descended. It flowed across their world like black oil. The Zephyrians watched their defenses dissolve on contact. Their energy shields flickered and died. Their peaceful deterrent systems failed completely. The swarm consumed organic matter and inorganic structures with equal hunger. It left behind only barren rock where forests once stood. Their scientific council calculated the timeline with chilling precision. At current consumption rates, total planetary extinction would occur in 47 days. Their leadership had no military commanders to consult. They possessed no war archives to study. Facing annihilation, they did what their culture knew best. They communicated. The transmission was stark, direct, and raw. It bypassed diplomatic formatting protocols. No elegant introductions, no cultural context, no subtle implications. Just a species screaming into the void for survival. They described cities dissolving, forests vanishing, their world being consumed molecule by molecule. Every word carried the weight of impending extinction. Their message traveled on emergency bands normally reserved for cosmic disasters. It contained sensor data showing the swarm's advance. It included population counts dwindling by the hour. The Zephyrians transmitted their own biological signatures as if proving they still existed. They offered nothing but desperation and the truth. Galactic communication protocols typically required weeks of verification. This transmission ignored all formatting rules. It used simple universal symbols of distress. The Zephyrians included their planetary coordinates repeated like a mantra. They sent structural diagrams of their vanishing cities as architectural obituaries. Their civilization had always valued preservation above aggression. Now they watched their world being digested alive. They documented the swarm's feeding process with scientific detachment, even as their homes vanished. Crystal spires that had stood for centuries melted like sugar in water. Forests that had grown for millennia dissolved into nutrient sludge. The Zephyrian leadership made their final calculation. They determined that honesty might be their only weapon. They transmitted their absolute vulnerability without embellishment. They showed their world dying in real time. Their message contained no demands, only a simple question repeated across the stars. Is anyone coming to help? They watched their transmission leave Kepler 442b's atmosphere. Then they returned to monitoring their world's consumption. The swarm continued its methodical destruction. Crystal dust filled the air where cities once stood. The Zephyrians recorded everything, believing evidence might be their only legacy. Their planetary sensors tracked the swarm's exponential growth. Each consumed molecule became new swarm biomass. The enemy reproduced faster than their scanners could count. The Zephyrians documented this too, adding the data to their ongoing transmission. They became historians of their own extinction event. The transmission ended with a final sensor reading. It showed the swarm had reached their capital's outer districts. Then silence. The Zephyrians kept broadcasting until the last moment. Their message traveled through space, carrying the weight of a civilization's final breath. The transmission reached 94 star systems with advanced spaceflight capability. Each civilization possessed warships that could cross interstellar distances. Their armadas carried weapons that could sterilize planets. Their technology included molecular disruptors and gravity bombs. Not a single fleet received mobilization orders. Instead, diplomatic servers logged the distress signal as Galactic Event 442b Unverified. Standard protocols required threat validation before action. The Triangulum Consensus formed a committee to assess intervention ethics. The Andromeda Federation ordered a sensor sweep to confirm swarm existence. The Orion League debated whether response violated non-interference treaties. Committees required balanced representation across member species. This meant weeks of delegate selection and agenda setting. The first emergency session scheduled preliminary discussions for 23 days after signal receipt. Delegates needed time to review galactic law precedents. They prioritized procedural correctness over temporal urgency. Assessment teams demanded raw sensor data from Kepler 442b. They questioned Zephyrian instrumentation calibration. Some analysts suggested the transmission might be an elaborate hoax. Others theorized the Zephyrians had provoked the swarm through reckless experimentation. Every hypothesis required peer review before dismissal. The galactic bureaucracy processed crises through 17 approval layers. Each department had required consultation with their oversight council. Legal teams drafted potential liability statements for failed interventions. Financial offices calculated resource expenditure against probable success rates. Insurance underwriters evaluated cosmic disaster coverage implications. Several species argued that sovereign autonomy protected even failing civilizations. They cited historical precedents where well-intentioned interventions caused greater harm. Purist factions maintained that natural selection should proceed unimpeded. They viewed the swarm as a galactic ecosystem correction mechanism. Other delegations focused on hypothetical Zephyrian culpability. They demanded evidence the civilization hadn't trespassed in swarm territory. Some suggested the Zephyrians might have weaponized the swarm themselves. These theories required extensive investigation before committing resources. Weeks passed without a single warship powering its engines. Navigation computers remained unprogrammed with Kepler 442b's coordinates. Weapon systems stayed in ceremonial display configurations. Crews continued routine patrols and maintenance cycles. The galactic response apparatus functioned perfectly according to its design. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian transmission updates grew increasingly dire. Their sensor readings showed swarm biomass doubling every 72 hours. Their population counts dropped by measurable percentages each update. Their environmental systems flickered offline one by one. Their messages became shorter, more fragmented, more desperate. The Galactic Council finally reached preliminary consensus after 38 days. They agreed to form a fact-finding mission comprising xenobiologists and diplomats. The mission required 6 weeks to assemble its multidisciplinary team. Their ship would conduct passive observation before making contact. They scheduled departure for 2 months after signal reception. By the time approval documents circulated for signatures, Kepler 442b's transmission had ceased entirely. Final sensor readings showed atmospheric composition shifting to methane and ammonia. The last broadcast contained images of crystal structures dissolving into gray slurry, then silence across all frequencies. The galaxy's meticulous processes had consumed the entire 47-day extinction window. Committees continued meeting to discuss lessons learned. Assessment teams wrote comprehensive reports on response improvement strategies. Legal departments archived the case for future reference. Meanwhile, the swarm continued reproducing on a now silent world. Jake Mitchell monitored the deep space communications array from a dimly lit control room. His console displayed thousands of simultaneous transmissions from across known space. Most signals followed predictable patterns: diplomatic exchanges, scientific data transfers, routine shipping manifests. The array automatically filtered and categorized each signal by priority level and content type. Mitchell's primary role involved monitoring system integrity rather than interpreting messages. He checked signal strength, verified decryption protocols, and ensured data flow continuity. The array's processing algorithms normally handled everything autonomously. Its sophisticated software could identify and route signals with perfect efficiency. Standard emergency broadcasts triggered specific response protocols automatically. But this transmission was different. It hit the array with multiple emergency priority flags simultaneously. The system's conflict resolution protocols couldn't process the signal's irregular formatting. An alert flashed on Mitchell's main display requiring human intervention. Mitchell pulled the raw transmission data. The signal originated from an unregistered source with extreme intensity. Standard translation software returned fragmented, contradictory interpretations. The message structure violated all diplomatic communication protocols. It contained sensor data embedded within emotional appeals. Scientific readings alternated with desperate requests for assistance. The translation algorithms struggled to separate factual information from visceral urgency. Mitchell bypassed the automated processing systems. He listened to the untranslated audio component. The vocal patterns conveyed panic through rhythm and pitch rather than vocabulary. He recognized the tonal qualities of a species under existential threat. This wasn't a formal distress call following galactic standards. It was a raw, unfiltered cry for survival. The signal contained images of crystalline structures dissolving into gray sludge. It showed biological readouts indicating mass casualties. Mitchell cross-referenced the transmission's origin coordinates. Kepler 442b wasn't in any known conflict database. No diplomatic relations existed with whatever species inhabited that system. Standard procedure required forwarding such signals to the diplomatic corps for evaluation. That process typically took weeks while analysts determined appropriate response protocols. Mitchell understood immediately that this situation couldn't wait for bureaucratic processing. He made a decision that violated 17 standing protocols. He tagged the transmission with maximum priority codes normally reserved for imminent planetary threats. He attached his own assessment recommending immediate military attention. The system logged his unauthorized actions automatically. Disciplinary review would likely follow regardless of the transmission's validity. Mitchell routed the message directly to military command channels instead of diplomatic offices. The transmission compressed and encrypted itself for secure transfer. It traveled through dedicated priority bandwidth reserved for strategic emergencies. Mitchell watched the progress indicator as the data packet moved through routing nodes. Each relay station added authentication markers and timestamps. The entire transmission process took under 4 minutes from reception to delivery confirmation. Admiral Rodriguez's personal terminal received the message with a distinct alert tone. Mitchell's unauthorized priority override flag made the transmission impossible to ignore. The system would require the Admiral's biometric confirmation before returning to normal operation. Mitchell sat back in his chair, waiting for the inevitable system audit notification. His console showed the transmission now existed outside normal processing channels. It had become a purely military matter. The array continued processing thousands of other signals normally. Diplomatic exchanges regarding trade agreements proceeded uninterrupted. Scientific data collections continued their scheduled transmissions. Routine shipping manifests updated automatically. Only Mitchell's console showed the extraordinary event that had just occurred. He watched the Admiral's status indicator change from available to engaged. The response had begun. Admiral Rodriguez's office remained silent except for the low hum of climate control. Her terminal displayed the decrypted transmission alongside Mitchell's urgent annotation. She scrolled through sensor readings showing crystalline structures dissolving. She studied population metrics indicating catastrophic decline. Her expression showed no reaction to the horrific imagery. Her fingers tapped a steady rhythm on the polished desk surface. Her senior aide entered with the standard response protocol binder. He began explaining diplomatic notification procedures. Rodriguez held up a single hand without looking away from the screen. She requested immediate tactical assessment from military intelligence. The aide hesitated, mentioning interstellar relations protocols. Rodriguez's gaze remained fixed on the dissolving cities. She compared the situation to a structural fire engulfing a residential block. You don't convene a neighborhood meeting when flames reach the roof. You deploy firefighters with water and axes. You prioritize rescue over discussion. Her command philosophy valued action during rapidly deteriorating situations. Assessment occurred concurrently with response not preceding it. Rodriguez authorized mobilization of 3 warships within the hour. The Defiance, Resolute, and Vanguard received immediate departure orders. Their crews began combat preparation procedures. Loading bays accepted full ammunition complements. Engineering teams activated weapon systems ahead of schedule. The ship's designation indicated maximum threat response configuration. Her deployment order specified 5,000 personnel, including Marine contingents. Selection prioritized combat experience over diplomatic training. The roster included specialists in biological containment and structural engineering. Medical teams prepared for mass casualty scenarios. Every position filled based on tactical necessity, rather than political consideration. The order included specific loadout instructions for unconventional warfare. Standard projectile weapons received acid-modified ammunition configurations. Flamethrower units were activated from storage. Environmental sealing protocols were implemented ship-wide. Rodriguez personally approved each equipment request without committee review. She set maximum speed transit protocols overriding standard safety margins. Navigation plotted a direct course with continuous acceleration burns. Engineers authorized reactor output beyond normal operational limits. The ships would maintain combat readiness throughout the journey. No comfort considerations modified the travel parameters. Rodriguez bypassed 17 approval layers normally required for extraterrestrial deployment. She used emergency command authority granted during existential threats. Her authorization triggered automatic notifications to Earth's Defense Council. They would receive full briefing materials during transit rather than before departure. The Admiral's final instruction prohibited diplomatic communications until mission completion. No contact with galactic councils or foreign governments. No status reports to interspecies relations departments. The operation would proceed as a purely military engagement. Earth's response would be actions rather than negotiations. Crews boarded their ships within 3 hours of the transmission's arrival. Docking clamps released simultaneously across the space dock. Thrusters ignited in coordinated sequence. The 3 vessels accelerated away from Earth's orbit. Their courses merged into a single formation heading toward Kepler 442b. Rodriguez monitored the departure from her command center. She received confirmation of successful transition to faster-than-light travel. The ships vanished from conventional radar tracking. Their estimated arrival time showed 43 days until planetary contact. The galaxy's committees remained unaware of Earth's response. The Void Swarm operated outside any known military doctrine. It followed biological imperatives rather than tactical principles. Its units consumed everything organic they encountered, dissolving complex structures into basic nutrients. Their digestive process worked on crystalline materials and living tissue with equal efficiency. They left behind barren landscapes where vibrant ecosystems once thrived. Their ships weren't constructed but grown. Living hive complexes expanded through continuous cellular division. They functioned as mobile breeding facilities and feeding platforms simultaneously. New swarm units emerged fully formed from organic pods lining the interior walls. The ships themselves were both transportation and nursery, constantly producing more of their kind. The swarm moved according to instinctual patterns, not coordinated strategy. They followed pheromone trails to concentration points, drawn to areas of high biological activity. Their movements appeared chaotic but followed deep genetic programming. They lacked command structure or hierarchy beyond basic stimulus response mechanisms. Each unit acted independently while contributing to collective outcomes. Individual swarm members showed no self-preservation instincts. They advanced regardless of casualties or environmental hazards. Lost units were immediately replaced by new births from the hive ships. Their reproduction rate exceeded casualty rates by significant margins. The swarm grew larger even while taking losses, expanding its coverage area exponentially. 17 major population centers had already been consumed when Earth's forces received the transmission. Each city represented millennia of Zephyrian cultural development. Vast forest systems that once covered continents were reduced to nutrient slurry. The swarm converted complex biological and mineral structures into homogeneous biomass. Their progress across the planet showed methodical completeness. Reproduction rates threatened total planetary consumption within the calculated time frame. Each consumed city provided biomass for thousands of new swarm units. Their expansion followed geometric progression, doubling their effective coverage area with each cycle. The Zephyrian defense efforts only temporarily slowed certain advancing fronts. The overall consumption rate continued accelerating despite localized resistance. Conventional energy weapons proved largely ineffective against swarm biology. Their organic armor dissipated thermal energy across wide surface areas. Kinetic weapons caused temporary damage that healed within minutes. Even explosive ordnance only created temporary gaps in their formations. The swarm adapted to each new weapon type through rapid evolutionary response. Zephyrian defenders watched their most powerful weapons fail repeatedly. They observed swarm units regenerating from seemingly fatal injuries. Their military efforts delayed certain advances but couldn't stop the overall progression. Each defensive victory was followed by renewed attacks from reinforced swarm numbers. The defenders exhausted their resources while the swarm grew stronger. Galactic observers classified the swarm as an existential-level threat. Military analysts predicted conventional forces would suffer catastrophic losses in any engagement. The consensus held that containing the swarm required planetary-scale quarantine measures. No known military had developed effective countermeasures against such biological warfare. The galaxy saw the swarm as an unstoppable force of nature. Their assessment concluded that intervention would only provide temporary relief at best. The swarm's reproductive capacity made complete eradication seem impossible. Most military doctrines focused on containment rather than elimination. No species had attempted full extermination against such rapidly reproducing opponents. The void swarm represented a problem without conventional solutions. Earth's analysts reviewed the transmission data with detached focus. They noted feeding patterns, reproduction cycles, and growth rates. They didn't see an unstoppable enemy, just a biological process operating at scale. Their assessment concluded this was an infestation, not an invasion. The response required pest control methodology, not conventional warfare. Military planners identified primary breeding sites from orbital imagery. They mapped consumption patterns showing swarm movement vectors. Their targeting priorities focused on reproduction facilities rather than combat units. They planned to disrupt the swarm's biological cycle at its source. The approach treated the enemy as a systemic problem rather than a tactical opponent. The operation would follow three-phase eradication protocols. First, elimination of breeding grounds to halt population growth. Second, disruption of nutrient supply chains to starve existing units. Third, targeted elimination of remaining clusters through chemical and thermal means. Each phase built upon the previous one's success, creating cascading failure across the swarm's biological network. Weapon selection favored practical effectiveness over technological sophistication. Acid-based compounds were chosen for their effect on organic tissues. Incendiary systems were prioritized for area denial and nest destruction. Even basic projectile weapons were loaded with specialized ammunition designed for maximum biological damage. The arsenal reflected centuries of terrestrial pest control experience. Galactic observers expected advanced energy weapons or exotic physics applications. They anticipated complex tactical formations and elaborate fleet maneuvers. Instead, they received deployment plans resembling agricultural pest management. The approach confused military theorists who valued technological superiority. Earth's methods focused on results rather than spectacle. The planning sessions involved entomologists and environmental scientists alongside military strategists. They analyzed the swarm's behavior through ecological competition models. They treated the void swarm as an invasive species rather than a conscious enemy. This perspective shift enabled solutions others hadn't considered possible. Operation plans included environmental impact assessments as standard procedure. Teams would minimize collateral damage to Kepler-442b's ecosystem. Chemical agents were designed to break down quickly after accomplishing their purpose. Kinetic strikes would target only swarm concentrations, avoiding pristine areas. The approach balanced thorough eradication with planetary preservation. Training simulations focused on identification and containment procedures. Marines learned to recognize breeding signs and feeding patterns. They practiced deploying chemical barriers and thermal containment fields. The preparation emphasized methodical processes over combat prowess. Success required discipline and precision rather than raw firepower. Logistical plans prioritized chemical production over ammunition manufacturing. Supply ships carried tankers of specialized compounds rather than extra missile payloads. Engineering teams modified standard equipment for dispersal operations. The entire operation's success depended on applied biology rather than military technology. The simplicity of the approach concealed its sophisticated underlying analysis. Each element addressed specific swarm vulnerabilities identified through careful study. The plan leveraged Earth's experience with rapidly reproducing biological threats. It represented practical problem-solving applied at planetary scale. Final deployment orders emphasized systematic execution over aggressive engagement. Crews received detailed environmental protocols alongside combat instructions. The operation would proceed with measured precision rather than explosive intensity. Earth's response was methodical, practical, and utterly relentless in its purpose. Dr. Amy Foster's laboratory aboard the Defiance hummed with analytical equipment. She extracted tissue samples from containment units, each specimen carefully cataloged during the transit. Her instruments probed molecular structures that defied initial classification. The swarm biology showed unfamiliar atomic bonding patterns. Standard carbon-based life detection protocols returned negative results across multiple tests. Her mass spectrometer revealed silicon-oxygen bonding where carbon should exist. The discovery explained why energy weapons had minimal effect. Silicon-based biology dissipated heat differently than carbon structures. It also meant certain acid compounds would react violently with their cellular makeup. Common industrial cleaning agents became potential weapons against the swarm. Foster analyzed reproductive samples under controlled conditions. The egg clusters required precise temperature ranges to develop properly. Slight variations caused catastrophic developmental failures. Their breeding cycle depended on environmental stability the Zephyrians had accidentally provided. Disrupting that stability could collapse their reproduction rate dramatically. Behavioral analysis showed simple stimulus-response patterns. The swarm reacted to chemical signals rather than complex reasoning. Their movements followed pheromone trails laid down by preceding units. They lacked any evidence of learning or adaptation beyond basic instinct. Their terrifying appearance concealed remarkably primitive cognitive functions. Communication systems relied on chemical markers rather than information exchange. Units released specific compounds to indicate food sources or danger. These signals could be replicated or blocked with relative ease. The swarm's coordination depended on continuous chemical conversation among units. Interrupting that conversation would cause immediate disorientation. Their biological simplicity made them vulnerable to targeted approaches. Complex enemies adapt to new threats, but instinct-driven organisms follow predictable patterns. The swarm would respond to certain stimuli exactly the same way every time. Their behavior could be manipulated through environmental manipulation rather than direct confrontation. Earth's agricultural history provided ready solutions for such biological threats. Farmers had centuries of experience dealing with infestation control. Industrial pest management had developed precise chemical compounds for specific organisms. Military stores included crowd control agents that could be modified for this purpose. Foster compiled her findings into a comprehensive biological profile. She identified 17 specific vulnerabilities across their life cycle. Each weakness could be exploited with existing technology and compounds. The report transformed the swarm from mythological terror into manageable biological phenomenon. Her recommendations focused on systemic disruption rather than direct combat. Target reproduction facilities with temperature manipulation agents. Deploy chemical counteragents to disrupt pheromone communication. Use specific acid compounds to break down silicon-based tissues. The approach required precision rather than overwhelming force. Command staff reviewed the findings with renewed perspective. The invasion became a large-scale extermination operation. Planning shifted from battle tactics to pest control methodology. Loading priorities changed to emphasize chemical dispersal systems over conventional weapons. Foster's discovery turned despair into operational confidence. The galaxy's invincible enemy became a solvable biological puzzle. Earth's forces possessed both the knowledge and tools for effective response. The swarm's terrifying appearance no longer mattered, only their biological vulnerabilities. The Zephyrian delegation entered the Defiance with crystalline limbs trembling. Their bodies refracted the ship's lighting into scattered rainbows across bulkheads. They moved with deliberate grace despite evident exhaustion. Their vocal patterns resonated with harmonic frequencies that translation software converted into somber tones. Their leader extended 6 slender limbs in formal greeting. They described losses in cultural terms rather than military metrics. Crystalline archives containing millennia of art had dissolved. Musical compositions encoded in light patterns had vanished forever. Architectural marvels that grew over centuries were now nutrient sludge. Their greatest sorrow involved lost knowledge rather than territorial control. They measured destruction in artistic and scientific terms. Their requests focused on preservation methods. They asked about containment strategies that might save remaining ecosystems. They inquired about non-lethal deterrent systems. They expressed concern about chemical agents affecting their environment long-term. Their entire approach valued minimal intervention and maximum conservation. They saw the swarm as a natural disaster requiring managed coexistence. Earth's command staff responded with operational necessities. They requested coordinates of remaining population centers. They needed swarm movement patterns and concentration data. Their questions focused on enemy numbers and reproduction rates. They sought tactical information rather than cultural context. The two civilizations measured the crisis through completely different metrics. Colonel Murphy's statement cut through the diplomatic exchange. He stated they were there to eliminate an infestation, not negotiate terms. His vocabulary deliberately used pest control terminology. He described swarm units as targets requiring eradication rather than enemies requiring engagement. His blunt phrasing carried no malice, only practical focus. The Zephyrians recoiled from the linguistic brutality. Their culture had never developed terms for deliberate destruction. Their language lacked vocabulary for systematic extermination. They valued all life forms as part of cosmic harmony. The concept of targeted eradication offended their fundamental philosophical principles. They hesitated, uncertain how to process the military's approach. Dr. Silverwing attempted cultural translation. She explained Earth's historical experience with invasive species. She described how certain threats required decisive action to preserve larger systems. Her scientific background helped bridge the conceptual gap between preservation and eradication. She framed the operation as ecosystem protection through targeted intervention. Dr. Foster countered with biological necessity. She presented tissue analysis showing exponential reproduction rates. She explained how hesitation would guarantee total planetary consumption. Her data indicated the swarm's biology allowed no possibility of coexistence. The choice was complete eradication or total extinction. There were no intermediate options available. The meeting revealed fundamental philosophical differences. The Zephyrians saw the universe as an interconnected web requiring balance. Earth's forces saw threats as problems requiring solutions. One culture valued harmony, the other valued results. Both sought planetary survival through completely opposing methodologies. The command staff acknowledged the cultural conflict, but maintained operational focus. They accepted the Zephyrians' environmental concerns while proceeding with prepared plans. They would minimize collateral damage where possible, but wouldn't compromise mission effectiveness. The meeting ended with mutual understanding of irreconcilable differences. Action would proceed regardless of philosophical alignment. The Zephyrians returned to their observation post with troubled expressions. They watched Earth's forces preparing weapons designed for maximum destruction. Their delicate hands traced patterns of concern in the air. They understood the necessity but mourned the methods. Their world would survive, but their philosophical certainty would not. Earth's Marines continued loading acid canisters and flame units. They checked targeting systems and environmental seals. Their movement showed professional focus without philosophical conflict. They had a job to perform, a threat to eliminate, a planet to save. The cultural divide meant nothing against operational requirements. Two civilizations faced the same crisis from opposite ends of understanding. Marine boarding parties breached the hive ship's outer membrane. Their cutting torches sliced through organic material that sealed like scar tissue. The interior atmosphere carried the dense odor of concentrated pheromones. Visibility dropped to near zero through the chemical haze. Marines activated helmet filters and switched to sensor-assisted vision. They moved through corridors that pulsed with rhythmic contractions. The ship's architecture mirrored terrestrial insect colonies. Tunnels branched from central thoroughfares like veins from an artery. Walls secreted lubricating fluids that eased movement of swarm units. The entire structure functioned as both habitat and transportation network. Marines noted the efficient biological engineering with professional appreciation. They recognized patterns from Earth's own ecosystem studies. Central control manifested as a massive neural cluster deep within the ship. It pulsed with coordinated electrical activity visible on bioscanners. This brain complex directed all swarm movement and reproduction. Destroying it would eliminate hive coordination entirely. The swarm would devolve into disconnected individuals without strategic direction. The Marines' objective became clear and singular. Their advance encountered swarm units of increasing size and aggression. Elephant-sized creatures with armored carapaces blocked critical junctions. Their mandibles snapped through alloy armor with disturbing ease. Marines used concentrated fire to break through organic plating. Acid rounds created bubbling wounds that didn't heal. Flamethrowers cleared corridors of smaller attackers. Close-quarters combat favored the swarm's physical strength. Marines used mobility and coordination against brute force. They fought in rotating teams that maintained constant pressure. Wounded soldiers were immediately extracted and replaced. The advance continued meter by meter through resistant flesh. Their progress was measured in casualties exchanged for territory. Sergeant Ramos identified the neural cluster's location through biosignature tracking. The reading indicated massive energy concentration 3 levels down. The route passed through the ship's main nursery chamber. This area contained developing egg clusters and juvenile swarm forms. Protection here would be most intense. The final approach revealed the brain complex's guardians. 3 swarm units larger than any previously encountered blocked access. Their carapaces showed thicker plating and sharper appendages. They moved with coordinated purpose rather than instinctual aggression. These were specialized defenders rather than standard units. Marines engaged with everything available. Rocket launchers fired armor-piercing rounds into joint sections. Grenades created temporary gaps in their defensive formation. The Guardians responded with coordinated attacks that tested Marine discipline. Their tactics showed rudimentary intelligence beyond normal swarm behavior. Ramos led a flanking maneuver through auxiliary passages. His team used thermal charges to create new entry points. They emerged behind the Guardians near the neural cluster itself. The brain complex pulsed with visible light patterns beneath transparent membrane. Its vulnerability was suddenly apparent. The final assault required simultaneous disruption. Some Marines engaged the Guardians directly, while others targeted the neural mass. Acid canisters exploded against the pulsating tissue. The brain complex convulsed with erratic energy discharges. The entire ship shuddered as coordination failed. Guardian units moved with suddenly confused patterns. The neural cluster collapsed into inert biomass. Its light patterns faded to darkness. Throughout the ship, swarm units stopped moving with purpose. They stumbled against walls and each other without direction. The hive mind had been eliminated. What remained were disconnected organisms without strategy. Marines extracted under collapsing structural integrity. The hive ship began dissolving without central control. Its biological systems failed in cascading collapse. The boarding parties reached their extraction point as corridors melted around them. They left behind a dying organism rather than a functioning warship. The operation proved swarm vulnerability beyond theoretical assessment. Their terrifying coordination depended on fragile central control. Remove the brain and the body became helpless. Earth's forces now possessed the key to systematic dismantling of swarm effectiveness. The invincible enemy had been reduced to manageable components. The assault plan organized destruction into 3 sequential phases. Each stage targeted specific swarm vulnerabilities identified through biological analysis. The approach ensured complete coverage without resource duplication. Coordination between phases created compounding effects against the enemy. Phase 1 involved orbital kinetic strikes against hive complexes. Tungsten rods would descend at hypersonic velocities. Their impact would vaporize organic structures instantly. The strikes targeted 17 primary breeding facilities identified through thermal scanning. This would eliminate the swarm's reproductive capacity before ground engagement. Precision targeting avoided Zephyrian population centers and cultural sites. The bombardment would create temporary atmospheric disturbances but cause minimal environmental damage. Phase 2 deployed chemical agents across swarm concentration zones. Dr. Foster's compounds targeted silicon-based respiratory systems. The airborne dispersal would penetrate deep into hive structures and underground nests. The chemicals caused rapid systemic failure in swarm biology. They were designed to break down within hours after accomplishing their purpose. This prevented long-term environmental contamination. The agents would achieve mass casualties without damaging planetary infrastructure. Phase 3 committed Marine units to clear remaining resistance. Ground forces would methodically sweep through affected areas. They used flamethrowers and acid sprays for close-quarters engagement. Their orders emphasized total eradication of surviving swarm units. Teams coordinated with orbital surveillance for real-time intelligence. The operation would eliminate any possibility of swarm regeneration. The plan prioritized maximum enemy casualties with minimum risk to personnel. It avoided direct confrontation where possible. Each phase leveraged technological advantages against biological weaknesses. The approach was ruthlessly efficient rather than ceremonious. It treated the swarm as a contamination requiring sterilization. Coordination between orbital and ground forces required precise timing. Kinetic strikes would conclude before chemical deployment. Chemical agents would dissipate before marine insertion. Each phase created optimal conditions for the next stage. The sequence ensured continuous pressure against swarm forces. Phase transitions were governed by environmental monitoring. Sensors would detect chemical agent concentration levels. Atmospheric conditions would be verified before marine deployment. Weather patterns were calculated into dispersal models. The operation adapted to real-time planetary conditions. The plan included comprehensive containment protocols. Emergency response teams stood ready for accidental exposure. Medical facilities prepared for potential chemical contact cases. Environmental specialists monitored ecosystem impact throughout. Every contingency received pre-planned response procedures. Success metrics focused on biological eradication rather than territorial control. The goal was zero surviving swarm organisms. Post-operation verification would involve atmospheric and soil testing. The standard was complete elimination, not acceptable casualty ratios. The operation would continue until all scans returned negative. The approach reflected Earth's historical experience with invasive species. It applied pest management principles at planetary scale. The methodology was systematic, empirical, and brutally practical. It required no advanced technology beyond what Earth already possessed. The solution matched the problem's biological nature, rather than its terrifying appearance. Final authorization came from Admiral Rodriguez without committee review. The order specified immediate execution upon arrival in orbit. There would be no further consultation with galactic authorities. Earth's forces would act while others continued discussing. The operation proceeded under maximum security protocols. Human Marines descended through clean atmospheric conditions. Their dropships avoided chemical residue zones still undergoing natural breakdown. They landed in precise formations outside remaining swarm concentrations. Thermal scans showed minimal heat signatures across the operational area. What remained were scattered pockets rather than organized forces. They moved through crystal cities with deliberate care. Their boots avoided fragile structural formations. Weapons remained pointed downward when not actively engaging targets. They treated the environment with professional respect, despite combat conditions. Every movement considered preservation alongside eradication. Their equipment was calibrated for biological effectiveness. Flamethrowers emitted precisely controlled cones of fire. Acid sprays delivered measured doses rather than saturation patterns. Even standard rifles fired specialized rounds that minimized collateral damage. The weapons were tools of selective removal rather than indiscriminate destruction. Coordination, with orbital surveillance, provided constant situational awareness. Marines received real-time updates on swarm movements. Their helmet displays showed thermal overlays of surrounding structures. They could identify cultural sites before entering new areas. The technology enabled both tactical effectiveness and environmental protection. Resistance was minimal and disorganized. Remaining swarm units showed confused movement patterns. They stumbled without pheromone guidance or central coordination. Many were already dying from chemical exposure. Engaging them required minimal effort and ammunition. The operation became cleanup rather than combat. The Marines worked methodically through assigned sectors. They cleared structures room by room when necessary. Open areas received wide area scanning before advancement. Their progress was measured and thorough rather than rushed. They ensured no swarm units remained behind their advance. Casualty counts remained remarkably low throughout the operation. 2 Marines were lost to structural collapses in unstable areas. 43 others received various injuries requiring medical attention. Most wounds came from environmental hazards rather than swarm opposition. The threat's capacity for harm had been largely neutralized. Cultural preservation was prioritized whenever possible. Marines marked significant sites with protective beacons. They avoided damaging crystalline structures during engagements. Some teams spent extra time stabilizing damaged architectural features. Their respect for Zephyrian heritage was evident in every action. The operation achieved 94% swarm eradication within days. Remaining units were too scattered for effective reproduction. Environmental monitoring confirmed no surviving breeding pairs. The swarm's biological presence had been reduced to manageable levels. Final cleanup would require ongoing surveillance rather than military action. The Marines demonstrated that thorough destruction could coexist with cultural respect. They eliminated the threat while preserving the civilization. Their methods balanced ruthless efficiency with environmental consciousness. They proved that eradication didn't require indiscriminate violence. The operation set new standards for planetary intervention. Their extraction proceeded with the same precision as insertion. Dropships collected teams according to scheduled timelines. They left behind secured zones and stabilized environments. The Marines departed as quietly as they had arrived. Their work was complete, their methods proven, their mission accomplished. Dr. Foster continued analyzing biological samples during cleanup operations. Her sequencing equipment processed genetic material from different swarm units. The results showed anomalous mutation patterns inconsistent with local evolution. She cross-referenced the data against galactic biodiversity databases. No matches appeared within the Milky Way's known species registry. The swarm possessed genetic markers that shouldn't exist in this galaxy. Comparative analysis revealed similarities with theoretical models of Andromeda life forms. Certain protein structures matched predictions for silicon-based biology from that galaxy. The evidence suggested extragalactic origin through natural transport mechanisms. They likely arrived on interstellar debris traveling between galaxies. A comet or asteroid might have carried dormant spores across the void. This changed the fundamental understanding of the threat. The swarm wasn't an invading military force with strategic objectives. They were an invasive species spreading through natural mechanisms. Their behavior followed boom-bust cycles seen in terrestrial infestations. They consumed resources until collapse, then sought new territories. Their movement was instinctual rather than intentional. This explained why conventional military tactics had failed repeatedly. The swarm didn't respond to deterrence or strategic pressure. They followed biological imperatives unaffected by tactical considerations. Their reproduction drives overrode survival instincts. They were essentially mindless consumers operating on ancient programming. Earth's pest control approach worked because it addressed the actual nature of the problem. They treated the swarm as biological contamination rather than military opposition. Their methods targeted reproduction and sustenance rather than combat formations. The solution matched the problem's fundamental reality. The galaxy had feared a cosmic-level threat with intelligent direction. They imagined strategic opponents with advanced technology and conscious malice. Instead, they faced a naturally occurring infestation with no intelligence whatsoever. The Void Swarm was essentially dangerous wildlife rather than conscious enemies. Earth's historical experience with invasive species proved decisive. Humanity had centuries of practice managing biological threats without strategic intelligence. They understood how to break reproduction cycles and disrupt feeding patterns. Their methods were honed against terrestrial equivalents like locust swarms and fungal infestations. The revelation transformed galactic perspective on the crisis. The terrifying enemy became a manageable biological phenomenon. Their apparent invincibility stemmed from misidentification rather than actual power. Once properly understood, they became vulnerable to targeted countermeasures. Dr. Foster's report circulated through command channels with immediate effect. It changed operational categorization from military engagement to environmental management. Subsequent response protocols would follow pest control models rather than warfare doctrines. The approach could be replicated against similar threats elsewhere. The galaxy's fear had been misplaced from the beginning. They prepared for strategic conflict when they needed biological intervention. Earth's practical mindset saw the reality others missed through their assumptions. The Deathworlders recognized nature's patterns where others saw supernatural threats. This understanding would influence future galactic crisis response. Biological assessment would become standard before military deployment. Species would be analyzed as ecological phenomena rather than strategic opponents. Earth's methods would set new standards for dealing with similar threats. The Void Swarm became case study number 1 in the new paradigm. Their terrifying appearance and destructive capacity became secondary to their biological simplicity. They were ultimately just another infestation requiring professional eradication. The galaxy had feared a demon but faced a pest. The Zephyrians walked through their reclaimed cities with quiet observation. Their crystalline structures stood intact amid cleared zones of environmental impact. Some areas showed chemical treatment marks where swarm concentrations had been eliminated. The air carried faint traces of decomposition, rather than active infestation. Their world had been saved through methods that still felt foreign to their cultural sensibilities. Captain Moon Whisper approached Admiral Rodriguez without ceremonial formality. Her crystalline form reflected the Admiral's uniform in fractured patterns. She spoke with the directness Earth's forces had demonstrated throughout the operation. Her words acknowledged the cultural divide while bridging it with newfound respect. She stated that her people would have continued debating protocols until their world was consumed. Earth's decisive action, however brutal it appeared, had preserved their civilization. The initial philosophical conflict gave way to practical gratitude. Zephyrian scientists began studying Earth's methods with intense curiosity. They analyzed the chemical compounds that eliminated the swarm so efficiently. They examined the precision targeting systems that spared their cultural sites. They recognized that different threats required different responses. Their preservation-focused philosophy expanded to include necessary intervention when facing extinction level. Events. Earth's personnel demonstrated ongoing respect for Zephyrian values during cleanup operations. Marines carefully documented cultural artifacts they encountered. Engineers helped stabilize damaged crystalline structures. Medical teams shared advanced techniques for treating chemical exposure. The cooperation built mutual understanding beyond the initial military operation. Both civilizations learned from their differences rather than insisting on conformity. The Zephyrians integrated pragmatic approaches into their recovery planning. They established rapid response protocols for future threats. They developed contingency plans that allowed for decisive action when needed. Their society began balancing preservation with preparedness. The near-extinction event taught them that survival sometimes required uncomfortable choices. Captain Moon Whisper summarized the cultural shift during a final briefing. She noted that Earth's methods had preserved life itself, which was the ultimate value. Their destruction of the swarm protected countless future generations. The momentary violence ensured long-term continuity. Sometimes preservation required accepting temporary damage for permanent security. Zephyrian artists began creating works that reflected their complex experience. Their crystalline sculptures showed both destruction and regeneration. Musical compositions incorporated themes of intervention and gratitude. Their culture documented the entire event as a lesson in adaptive thinking. They honored Earth's help while processing their own philosophical evolution. The recovery operation continued with joint teams working together. Zephyrians learned practical skills from Earth's personnel. Humans gained appreciation for Zephyrian artistic and scientific achievements. The cultural exchange became as valuable as the military victory. Both species emerged with deeper understanding of different approaches to crisis management. Earth's forces prepared for departure with formal ceremonies. The Zephyrians presented gifts of crystalline art that symbolized protection and gratitude. Their leaders expressed thanks for the difficult decisions that saved their world. They acknowledged that their preservation required Earth's willingness to take decisive action. The cultural clash had transformed into mutual respect through shared experience. The Admiral accepted their gratitude with professional humility. She noted that different problems require different solutions. Sometimes delicate preservation works. Sometimes decisive action becomes necessary. The key was understanding which approach matched the threat. Earth had simply applied the appropriate method for this particular crisis. The Zephyrians watched Earth's ships depart with changed perspective. Their world would recover, their culture would endure, their species would continue. They had learned that survival sometimes means breaking a few eggs to save the flock. Their philosophical purity had been tempered by practical necessity. They would remember both the destruction and the deliverance equally. The Galactic Council received Earth's operational report through standard diplomatic channels. The document was unusually brief by galactic standards. It contained minimal ceremonial language and maximum operational data. Council members expected lengthy justifications and complex explanations. Instead, they received concise mission summaries and biological analysis. The efficiency of the presentation was as striking as its content. Council chambers fell silent during the report review. Delegates from dozens of species studied the results with growing disbelief. They had predicted military catastrophe and massive collateral damage. Instead, they read about precise elimination with minimal environmental impact. The timeline showed action taken within hours rather than months. The effectiveness metrics defied all previous assumptions about the swarm threat. Ambassador Carol Wright stood before the assembly with calm professionalism. She wore standard diplomatic attire without military embellishment. Her presentation style matched the report's straightforward nature. She didn't offer elaborate justifications or defensive explanations. She simply stated that Earth was available to assist when others couldn't or wouldn't. Her tone carried no accusation, only factual reporting. Council members questioned Earth's military capabilities with concern. They inquired about weapons technology and strategic doctrines. They expressed alarm at the rapid deployment timeline. Their questions reflected anxiety about this new player in galactic affairs. They saw potential threat where Earth saw opportunity for assistance. The ambassador's response cut through their concerns with simple clarity. She explained that Earth possessed no secret weapons or advanced technology. Their success came from practical problem-solving rather than military superiority. They had treated the swarm as a biological infestation requiring eradication. Their methods were honed through centuries of terrestrial pest management experience. This answer created both relief and confusion among delegates. They had expected tales of advanced weaponry or exotic physics. Instead, they heard about chemical compounds and temperature control. The solution seemed too simple for such a complex problem. They struggled to reconcile the method with the results achieved. The Council extended formal invitation for knowledge sharing. They requested Earth's expertise be added to galactic defense protocols. They recognized that different threats required different approaches. Earth's practical methods filled a gap in their collective security framework. The invitation represented significant diplomatic advancement. Earth's position transformed within the Council chambers. They shifted from unknown outsiders to essential partners. Their straightforward approach became valued alongside more complex methodologies. Delegates began viewing them as problem solvers rather than potential threats. The cultural differences became assets rather than obstacles. The Council established new crisis response categories based on Earth's model. They created biological threat protocols that prioritized rapid assessment and intervention. They integrated pest control methodologies into military planning. The entire galactic security framework expanded to include practical problem solving. Earth's reputation spread through diplomatic networks rapidly. Other civilizations began requesting consultation on various threats. They sought Earth's perspective on problems that had resisted conventional solutions. The Deathworlders became specialists in handling difficult cases that others avoided. The Council chambers continued their normal operations with changed perspective. Delegates now had additional options when facing complex crises. Earth's methods provided alternatives to traditional diplomatic or military responses. The galaxy's security became more flexible and adaptable through this inclusion. Ambassador Wright returned to her duties with quiet satisfaction. She continued representing Earth's interests without grandstanding or boasting. Her approach remained focused on practical cooperation rather than political maneuvering. Earth had found its place in the galactic community through actions rather than negotiations. Earth Defense Solutions formed as a distinct branch within the global security framework. Its mandate focused exclusively on crisis scenarios that conventional approaches couldn't resolve. The department operated outside standard military hierarchies, answering directly to planetary defense coordinators. Its structure emphasized flexibility and rapid response over bureaucratic procedure. Team composition varied based on threat profiles rather than following fixed organizational charts. Their operational motto reflected practical simplicity. We handle the hard cases. This philosophy guided their selection process and methodology development. They accepted missions that other civilizations considered impossible or unacceptable. Their criteria focused on problem-solving potential rather than political considerations. They became the galaxy's emergency service for existential threats. Services were categorized using pest control terminology rather than military designations. Infestation eradication, contamination cleanup, and biological containment became their specialty areas. They offered scalable solutions from single-structure treatments to planetary-scale interventions. Their approach treated crises as technical challenges rather than conflicts. This perspective shift allowed unconventional solutions that others overlooked. The galactic economy adjusted to accommodate Earth's unique expertise. Contracting procedures were streamlined for rapid crisis response. Payment structures were based on results achieved rather than resources expended. Other civilizations began maintaining retainer agreements for emergency access. Earth's methods became a valuable commodity in galactic security markets. Training facilities opened on Earth and allied worlds. Their curriculum combined biological sciences with practical field experience. Students learned to assess threats through ecological frameworks rather than military analysis. The training emphasized adaptability and creative problem-solving. Graduates returned to their civilizations with new perspectives on crisis management. Humanity's pragmatic approach became a strategic asset rather than a cultural oddity. Their willingness to employ messy solutions saved civilizations others had written off. They operated where diplomatic protocols failed, and military doctrine fell short. Their methods filled a critical gap in galactic security capabilities. They became the first call when conventional options were exhausted. Respect was earned through results rather than diplomacy. Other civilizations valued their effectiveness over their politeness. They were known for solving problems, not for elegant negotiations. Their reputation grew through successful interventions across numerous star systems. Trust was built one resolved crisis at a time. Their operational ethos accepted necessary destruction to achieve preservation. They understood that some situations required getting hands dirty. This willingness to make difficult choices saved lives that would otherwise be lost. They operated in the gray areas between perfect solutions and total failure. Their pragmatism became their most valuable export. Earth found its galactic role through embracing its fundamental differences. Rather than conforming to existing paradigms, it offered something unique. The Death World experience became a professional advantage rather than a limitation. They turned their harsh planetary history into specialized expertise. The galaxy needed what only Earth could provide. Earth's success against the Void Swarm revealed a fundamental truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. They operated from a different set of instincts forged through survival on a death world. Their home planet was a constant challenge that demanded practical solutions over philosophical debate. This background gave them unique perspective when facing galactic-scale threats. They saw problems where others saw impossibilities. Humanity's history was written in overcoming biological threats. They had survived plagues that wiped out significant populations. They had managed invasive species that threatened entire ecosystems. They developed pest control methods through centuries of trial and error. This experience translated directly to handling the Void Swarm crisis. Their approach was born from necessity rather than theory. They didn't perceive the swarm as invincible enemies. They saw them as biological problems requiring solutions. This perspective shift was crucial to their success. Where galactic civilizations saw strategic opponents, Earth saw infestation patterns. Their assessment focused on vulnerabilities rather than strengths. They looked for weaknesses in the biological cycle rather than military formations. Their methods were honed through terrestrial challenges. They had mastered eradication techniques against persistent threats. They understood how to break reproduction cycles and disrupt food supplies. They developed chemical solutions for specific biological profiles. These approaches were practical rather than technologically advanced. They applied existing knowledge to new problems effectively. They approached crises with blunt efficiency rather than ceremony. There were no lengthy deliberations or ceremonial preparations. Decisions were made based on practical considerations. Actions were taken with minimum delay and maximum effect. Their priority was results rather than process. This mindset allowed rapid response when time was critical. This made them uniquely suited to handle galactic-scale biological threats. They possessed the right combination of perspective and experience. Their Deathworld upbringing provided mental flexibility. Their historical challenges had developed practical problem-solving skills. They could see solutions that others missed due to conventional thinking. Where galactic civilization saw impossibility, Earth saw routine pest control. The Void Swarm matched patterns they had encountered before. The scale was larger, but the principles remained the same. They recognized the biological patterns beneath the terrifying appearance. This recognition allowed confident application of proven methods. Their Deathworld origin became their greatest strength rather than limitation. The harsh environment had forged practical resilience. The constant challenges had developed adaptive thinking. The survival requirements had created innovative problem solvers. What seemed like a disadvantage became their most valuable asset. They became the galaxy's exterminators because they were good at it. Their methods produced reliable results with minimal collateral damage. Their approach was both effective and efficient. They solved problems that others considered unsolvable. Their reputation grew through consistent success where others had failed. The Deathworlder advantage wasn't about strength or technology. It was about perspective and practical experience. They understood that some threats required direct action rather than discussion. They were willing to make difficult decisions when necessary. Their value to the galaxy was their ability to handle what others couldn't. Humanity found its role not through conformity, but through embracing its differences. Their unique background provided solutions that polished civilizations lacked. They operated where diplomacy and conventional military approaches failed. Their pragmatic mindset became the galaxy's insurance against certain types of threats. They were the ones who got things done when everything was falling apart. The Void Swarm taught an unforgiving lesson in crisis response. Earth demonstrated that different threats demand different solutions. Sometimes survival requires breaking a few eggs to save the flock. The galaxy learned to value decisive action over endless discussion when fires need extinguishing. Earth found its purpose not in polished diplomacy, but in practical problem-solving. Their Deathworld heritage became the galaxy's insurance policy against impossible threats. When the next emergency comes, they won't form committees, they'll grab hoses and get to work. The galaxy now understands that burning houses need firefighters, not diplomats. Earth answered when others only debated. Phase 1 commenced without ceremony. Tungsten rods released from orbital platforms. They fell through Kepler 442b's atmosphere in precise formations. Their descent generated hypersonic shockwaves audible from the surface. Each rod weighed several tons, yet contained no explosive payload. Their destructive power came from velocity and mass alone. Impact occurred at calculated coordinates across the planet. The rods struck hive complexes with surgical accuracy. They hit within meters of designated target points. Organic structures vaporized instantly upon contact. The energy release created brief, intense fireballs visible from orbit. Then nothing remained but shallow impact craters. 17 primary breeding sites vanished within minutes. Each facility had contained thousands of developing swarm units. Their destruction eliminated the swarm's reproductive capacity in a single stroke. Secondary explosions rippled through adjacent structures as stored nutrients ignited. The chain reaction cleared entire regions of swarm infrastructure. Precision targeting protected Zephyrian population centers. Impact points maintained safe distances from surviving cities. No civilian areas experienced collateral damage. The strikes avoided cultural sites and environmental preserves completely. Only swarm concentrations received attention. The bombardment demonstrated terrifying accuracy alongside restrained application. The kinetic energy release created temporary atmospheric disturbances. Shock waves rippled outward from impact sites. Dust clouds rose briefly before settling back to the surface. The effects were localized and short-lived. Environmental monitoring showed minimal ecosystem impact beyond target zones. The operation preserved what it had come to save. Zephyrian observers watched through telescopic arrays. They saw their enemies' strongholds disappear in flashes of light. Structures that had dominated their skylines for months vanished without trace. The swiftness of the destruction left them speechless. Their own efforts had taken weeks to achieve minimal results. Earth's weapons worked with brutal efficiency. The swarm's coordination network suffered immediate disruption. Communication between remaining units became fragmented and confused. Their reproductive cycle stopped completely with the breeding sites destroyed. The remaining swarm continued functioning on residual instincts, but their capacity for organized aggression had been eliminated. Orbital sensors confirmed target elimination before proceeding. Each strike site showed complete structural dissolution. Thermal readings indicated no surviving swarm concentrations. Radiation counts remained within acceptable parameters. The phase achieved its objectives without requiring adjustment. The plan proceeded exactly as designed. The tungsten rods represented simple physics applied with precision. They required no advanced technology beyond targeting systems. Their effectiveness came from accurate intelligence and calculated delivery. Earth's approach favored practical solutions over technological spectacle. The method proved both ancient and devastatingly modern. Phase 1 concluded with comprehensive damage assessment. Scout ships mapped the impact sites with high-resolution sensors. They confirmed total destruction of designated targets. Minor adjustments were made for Phase 2 deployment, based on updated topography. The operation continued without pause between stages. The Zephyrians continued monitoring from their protected zones. They witnessed the careful balance between force and restraint. Earth's weapons had destroyed their enemy while preserving their world. The cultural dissonance remained, but the results were undeniable. Their planet had just received the most precise devastation imaginable. Phase Doctor. 2 Deployment began with precision aerosol dispersal. Dr. Foster's chemical agents misted across targeted regions from high altitude. The compounds drifted downward through hive entrances and ventilation shafts. They penetrated deep into subterranean nests where swarm concentrations were highest. The chemicals sought silicon-based respiratory systems with molecular precision. The agents targeted specific enzyme receptors in swarm biology. They disrupted cellular respiration at the metabolic level. Swarm units experienced systemic failure within minutes of exposure. Their silicon tissues broke down into inert compounds. Mortality rates reached 98% in enclosed spaces. Open areas showed slightly lower but still catastrophic effectiveness. Environmental safeguards were engineered into every molecule. The compounds broke down into harmless elements after 6 hours. They left no persistent contamination in soil or water systems. Their design prioritized planetary safety alongside lethal efficiency. Zephyrian monitoring stations confirmed minimal ecosystem impact. The chemicals worked with surgical specificity against their intended targets. The swarm's numbers collapsed as the mist spread. Units fell where they stood without coordinated response. Their pheromone trails dissipated as emitting units ceased functioning. Remaining swarm members stumbled without directional guidance. The chemical attack disrupted both biology and communication simultaneously. The enemy's organizational capacity unraveled completely. Ground sensors reported massive biological activity cessation. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures vanishing across entire regions. Acoustic monitors detected decreasing movement sounds. The swarm's presence diminished by measurable percentages each hour. Their terrifying numbers became manageable remnants almost immediately. Dr. Foster monitored atmospheric concentrations from orbit. She adjusted dispersal patterns based on real-time wind data. The operation adapted to changing environmental conditions effortlessly. Some areas required additional applications while others needed none. The approach demonstrated flexibility alongside destructive power. Zephyrian observers witnessed the silent effectiveness. They saw swarm units collapsing without visible injury. The chemicals left structures and vegetation untouched while eliminating the threat. Their crystalline cities stood undamaged amid the dying swarm. The method achieved destruction without desecration. The chemical agents represented centuries of terrestrial pest control experience. They applied agricultural science to military-scale problems. Their development required no advanced technology beyond basic chemistry. Earth's solution leveraged existing knowledge rather than exotic innovations. The approach was brutally practical and scientifically sound. Phase 2 concluded with comprehensive atmospheric testing. Sensors confirmed chemical agent breakdown according to schedule. Residual concentrations fell below safety thresholds within predicted timelines. The environment showed no lasting damage from the deployment. Swarm populations had been reduced to scattered remnants. The operation proceeded to Phase 3 with confidence. Marine units began final preparation for ground insertion. They would face minimal resistance thanks to chemical effectiveness. The swarm's terrifying numbers had been neutralized through scientific application. What remained required cleaning rather than combat.